The Independence for St. Martin Foundation came into existence in 1994, year of the first constitutional referendum held in St. Martin. The political establishment at the time campaigned for option A, the status quo. No political party then, nor in the second referendum in 2000, wanted anything to do with independence. That hasn't changed till this day. However, the popular support for independence has grown tremendously. From the 4% option D, that is independence obtained in the 1994 referendum, it leapt to more than 14% in the 2000 referendum and over 30% in a survey done in 2003, the last time statistical data was available. Today, independence is no longer a taboo in our political discourse. And judging by the number of MPs that now and then say that they are for independence, it is reasonable to say that we have a parliament that would vote for independence tomorrow were such a motion to be tabled. That is why it is strange, at least to me, that no one has picked up the phone yet to call the Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte, who seemed to have challenged our politicians to give him a call whenever they were ready for independence. As a foundation and the only organized voice for the independence of our island, we have been working hard, given the prevailing political climate on the island, to sensitize the population and ignite the fire of freedom in our people. The same fire which drove the Diamond Estate 26 to run for their freedom, a historic watershed which will be reenacted on June 30th. We have relentlessly fought for July 1st, Emancipation Day, to become a public holiday, a goal which was achieved in 2012 thanks to the initiative and relentless efforts carried out during the period your humble servant was Minister of Education, Culture, Sports, and Youth Affairs. Another celebration of Emancipation Day is around the corner. And as an organization whose raison d'etre is the political freedom of our island, in furtherance of the struggle of our ancestors to free themselves from the evil institution of slavery, we decided to organize this lecture. We are immensely grateful that Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, accepted our invitation to deliver this keynote lecture on the topic of reparations. But before I call him to the lectern, I'd like to invite our Prime Minister, the Honorable Marcel Gomes, to address you.
The movement for reparatory justice is gaining momentum and greater focus than ever before in the Caribbean region. The government and people of St. Martin would be out of step with the history and progress of this dynamic region if we do not pay close attention to the historical, socioeconomic, political, and legal discussions and proposals about reparations as it relates to the sovereign countries and the territories in the Caribbean and the European countries concerned, including the Netherlands. This Emancipation Day lecture bridges the yearning for freedom, justice, human dignity, and democratic development, from the first runaway from slavery in the Caribbean to the Diamond Estate 26 in Colby, and the demonstrations by the enslaved people that forced the process verbal emancipation on the Netherlands part of St. Martin, which then placed it in step with emancipation in the north or the French side of our island, all in 1848. This lecture and a timely topic also bridges the labor and nationhood movement for Caribbean freedom to to what is becoming a major emancipation movement of our times, reparations, for enhancing the awareness in St. Martin about the various positions on reparations. I welcome and thank the Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Ralph Gonsalves, a learned, courageous, and steadfast frontline advocate of reparations in the Caribbean region. I also want to commend the Independence for St. Martin Foundation. Thank you all, and have a fruitful exchange.
And thank you again for, on such short notice, granting us your full cooperation, which has facilitated this Emancipation Day lecture. We would like to believe, Prime Minister Gums, that you are an independista at heart. Thank you again. At the International Conference on the Last Colonies in the Caribbean, which the Independence for St. Martin Foundation convened earlier this year, 4 resolutions were unanimously passed, including one supporting CARICOM's initiative in favor of reparatory justice. In that resolution, we iterated our belief that reparations is not only a moral obligation, but also one of integrity and a legal right of the Caribbean people and others who have suffered a similar historical trauma. We resolved, and I quote, to undertake public awareness campaigns to raise consciousness in the region and beyond about the need for reparations and the efforts that are being undertaken to achieve this, end of quote. This conference, therefore, is in accordance with that resolution. Dr. Ralph Gonsalves has been at the forefront of the struggle for reparations, regionally and internationally. Not only is Ralph Everard Gonsalves, also known as Comrade Ralph, the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but he's also the leader of the Unity Labour Party. He first entered political life as a student at the University of the West Indies at Mona, Jamaica. In 1968, as president of the Guild of Undergraduates, Gonsalves led the student protest at the banning of popular historian and intellectual Walter Rodney. Gonsalves would later go on to earn his doctorate in political science from UWI Mona and a law degree from the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill, Barbados, before returning to practice law and become an active politician in his homeland, and I must say, land of my mother's birth. It is now my privilege and a great honor to give you Comrade Ralph, a true general in our march toward reparatory justice.
I'm very happy to be here this evening to associate with the organization which is pushing for reparatory justice in this part of the Caribbean. I should have been here for many years now. The truth is this, there always something conspired to keep me away, and on this occasion, just over a week ago, I was opening 3 bridges and I sprained my ankle, and my secretary said, "Oh, there goes St. Martin again." I say, if I have to walk with a stick, I'm going to St. Martin this time. I really want to have a conversation on this subject and unrelated issues. Emancipation, what is happening in the Dominican Republic with the Haitians, and persons of Haitian descent who are citizens of the Dominican Republic, or who ought to be citizens in accordance with all international norms, or any such related question. I want us to have a conversation and a reasoning. and I'm hoping that we'll have sufficient time left for us to have questions. We are supposed to be out of here, I understand, by 9:30. We're off to a little late start, and we'll see how it goes. I want to put the case very simply, and I want to talk about how do we proceed and what we are doing. In short, I want this to be a conversation about going forward. I don't want it to be a discussion about agitation. As I told someone who was asking me to be agitational at another forum on this question, told him that I am the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I am no less a Prime Minister than David Cameron. Smaller country, but no less a Prime Minister. And I don't have to be outside of Downing Street with a placard. There are ways in which I can get my message heard in a non-confrontational and sober manner, because we have an unanswerable case for reparations. Let's begin, first of all, as to what we talk about when we talk about reparations. It's really to repair the legacy, to put ourselves in a situation where we ought reasonably to have been if we didn't have native genocide and African slavery. To have a repairing. Now, if you have a claim against someone who has injured you in the law courts, the compensation which you get is a form of repairing to put you in your condition where you otherwise would have been. So, by parallel reasoning, this is the notion of reparation, repairing. Of course, because we are dealing with historical circumstances long, long ago, native genocide and African slavery, we have to make sure that we have a well-documented case. We must have identifiable groups who are the current personification of the legacy of native genocide and African slavery. Thirdly, we need to have, other than legitimate moral outrage about crimes against humanity, we must have a basis in international law to proceed. And one such basis is the Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, which is signed by all the European countries and by most of the Caribbean countries, including St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which speaks to the issue of repairing the legacy of native genocide and African slavery. The legacy of underdevelopment as a consequence of native genocide and African slavery. If you read any of the standard history books, you will see that between 1530 and 1770, Michael Cratton has done the estimate, you had the native populations reduced by about 90%. And in the case of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, when the British took suzerainty of our country at the end of the 7 Years' War in 1763, 7 Years' War between France and Britain, there were 9,000 persons who were either Kalinago, which is what they say, yellow Caribs, and Garifuna, black Caribs. But by 1797, through a series of wars, basically over the land of the indigenous people, the British carried out an exercise of genocide where they decimated the population from 9,000 to just about 1,700. Indeed, at the end of the last war with the Kalinago and the Garifuna, when the Garifuna chief, Joseph Chatoyer, was killed in battle, the British deported just over 5,000 to an island offshore St. Vincent, which is part of our jurisdiction, called Baliso. And Baliso was then, and still is, a very inhospitable place. We don't have water in it. And within 6 months, half of the people died. And then they transported, they exiled the other 2,500, thereabouts, to the Bay of Honduras, to an island called Raton Island, where the historian said that the only animals which could survive were lizards and iguanas, but the Garifuna survived, and several hundreds of thousands are now living in Belize, in Guatemala, in Nicaragua, and in Honduras, and in the United States of America. A remarkable story of survival. What was left in St. Vincent, in the northeast of the country, was a small group of a proud nation which fought the British for about 30-odd years. The might of the European empires fought them. Of course, they fought the people over their land. But when the British came in 1763, one of the first things they did was to declare that all land belonged to the British Crown. Hitherto, it had all belonged to the Kalinago and the Garifuna in common. The Garifuna really a mixture of persons of African descent, Africans, people who had runaway slaves from Barbados, and some who came to St. Vincent through a shipwreck, and there were intermarriages. And that's when you had the so-called yellow Caribs and mating with the so-called African slaves, freed ones now, that you got the Garifuna, the so-called black Caribs. Incidentally, let me say this. we have to start to relearn the very language. The word Carib comes from a North Phoenician term, Sharib, which means the fierce and warlike ones. But the word Kalinago, in the language of the Kalinago people, Kalinago means the peaceful ones. So the people were there peacefully enjoying their lands. But some guys came from Europe, decided to take over the lands, and they fought for their lands. And they called them fierce and warlike. If you leave all the way in Europe or anywhere for that matter to take my land, I'm going to fight to keep my land. It's a fundamental, elementary point. So the very language, even when we use it, even as shorthand, we must know its origin and its meaning. The Kalinago and the Garifuna had allowed the French to occupy about 2,000 acres of land on the western side of St. Vincent. And they grew a number of agricultural products. French people who came from Martinique and Guadeloupe. When the British came, they said all the lands were theirs. And between St. Vincent and Grenadines, it's about 100,000 acres of land. Systematically over 37 years from 1763, in addition to decimating the population by way of genocide, they moved them further and further off the land until by 1800 they were left to occupy 237 acres of the most inhospitable areas. The poorest part of St. Vincent and the Grenadines is what is called Carib country. I'm talking about the legacy. I'm giving you St. Vincent. Remember, I tell you the whole of the Caribbean and what has happened, 90% over close to 240 years decimated. But I'm giving you an example in a country on a smaller scale. Just think of this. If you remove, and when I talk about repairing for native genocide and African slavery, I want you to get a picture as to what I'm talking about. And when I said to repair us, to put us in a condition where reasonably we would have been, had it not been for the native genocide and for the African slavery. Think of this. I know some of you may be saying in your head, but Britain brought technology. When they brought sugarcane, they brought the Muscovado process. And you can talk all of those things. Well, these engagements between Europe and the Caribbean could have taken place on a different footing. Didn't have to take place on the footing, Your Excellency, of genocide and stealing people's lands. Could have taken place in a manner in which both sides could reasonably benefit, in the way in which we do things nowadays. But picture this. You push people into an inhospitable northeast of the country, 237 acres of land out of 100,000 acres. And you kill out the bulk of the active male population. You kill out some of the women too. But you left women, some old people, and some children. Look, we are all grown people. How are we going to keep the civilization going? We have to eat, We have to drink. And we have to procreate in order to continue the species. And to eat and drink, you have to work. But if the strong people, you don't kill them or you deport them, and you take away the land, how are they going to work? That's the first thing. And secondly, if you kill out all the strong young men or deport them, who going to procreate with the young women then? They had to go and leave the community and look for mates outside, or the mates coming in. And when the mates are coming in, colonialism would say, well, you see, Caribou man, they're slack. Huh? Well, they ain't no more slack. No more or no less than the British women, or please forgive me, the Dutch women. And a lot of people simply took to rum. That is what happened among the native Indians in America, you know. That's what happened with the Maoris in New Zealand. And the indigenous people also in Australia. It's a universal phenomenon. So I'm talking here now about the consequences of colonialism and native genocide in a Caribbean country. I can tell the same story for other countries in the region in relation to native genocide. And then the lands which were taken, stolen, well, the law says that you can't steal lands, because you can only steal something which you can transport. You know, you must have asportation. You can thief a microphone, but you can't thief land. But you could rob people of the land. You could take it away. You can use force and occupy it, and they can't use it. Huh? Whatever the legal definition. So when I put stolen there, I don't want any legal scholar there to say you can't steal what cannot be moved. So I put it in inverted commas. So anytime I use it, just see the inverted commas.